As the heroes push on through the narrowing passage, the air thickens with tension and the scent of sulfur. Strange occult markings adorn the cave walls, but the party presses on, oblivious to the arcane traps set in motion by their every step. The door ahead swings open, revealing not treasure, but an inky blackness. Tentacles, like shadows given form, emerge from the darkness, reaching hungrily towards the party. And then, as if summoned from the very depths of despair, a barbed demon materializes behind them, a sinister grin etched upon its fiendish visage. The party now finds themselves ensnared in a deadly dance, surrounded by a pair of ancient evils. Can they summon the wit and strength to survive? Hi, my name is Andrew, and today I'm talking about traps, why and how to use them. I think traps are a vital part of any good dungeon, because they are a great tool for the DM to offer challenges for the party. What are traps? Traps are anything that challenges the characters that are not merely hit points and armor class, commonly known as monsters. Often I use them in conjunction with monsters to increase the dynamic of a given battle. I think traps can be a great tool in creating atmosphere and ratcheting up the tension. What are traps for? I think traps have two major purposes. The first reason is to challenge the characters, which is to say challenging the character sheets, asking for saving throws, skill checks, reducing their hit points, making them use abilities and resources are all examples of challenging the characters. For example, Levitate, Floating Disc, and Gust, used in the correct combination, are capable of foiling nearly any pressure plate. The second reason to use traps is to challenge the players, making them think creatively, asking questions like, how can we outsmart this trap? Can we avoid the trap altogether? Are great ways to challenge the players. Now, I think that there are three major kinds of traps. The first is new traps, which is to say traps built by recent denizens of a dungeon, be they goblins or gnolls or bandits, doesn't really matter. Things like pit traps, explosives, alarm bells are all examples of traps built by recent denizens primarily to let them know when an enemy is attacking them. There are plenty of real-life examples that you can use as inspiration for your traps. Two that I like are snake pit traps, which were employed by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, or how during the First World War, the Germans would plant mines near abandoned equipment. The second major kind of trap are old traps, which is to say traps built by the original designers of the tomb or whatever it is that the players are going through, which are primarily meant to prevent intruders from getting in the first place. Triggers for those kinds of traps tend to be things like trap chests, pressure plates, tripwires, etc., and they will oftentimes trigger swinging blades or pendulums, darts, rolling boulders to crush people. Those traps can oftentimes be magical as well. Things like Cliff of Warding, where if you get close enough, a giant magical explosion occurs. Or illusory floors, where when you walk into a room, you realize, oh, that's not actually floor, I'm now in a pit. Another example of those old type traps are things like constructs, where a giant stone statue comes to life and attacks any intruders. Now at that point it's less of a trap and it's more of a monster, but the trap is trying to avoid activating them in the first place. The third major kind of trap are living traps, also known as environmental challenges. Things like slimes, oozes, shambling mounds. Including some of those kinds of monsters and what would otherwise be a perfectly normal and typical encounter can force the players to think outside of the box. There's of course my classic gelatinous cube trick, but another classic move is to describe a room with a chest on a slightly raised platform. As they grow near, they notice a faint acrid smell, and that the chest looks to be in poor condition, likely owing to its age. If the players want more details, you can describe how the metal joints all look to be partially corroded. When they open the chest, the platform beneath them drops out into a pit with a living black pudding, which will try to dissolve them into a strong acid. Now that's all well and good, but how do you actually go about designing traps? When designing a trap, I think that there are a couple of important factors to consider. The first is, what level are the PCs? Is there a rogue in the party? And what style of game are you running? Now the first and most obvious question is, what level are the PCs? Obviously a trap that requires a DC 12 dex save and only does 2d6 damage on a failure will be little more than an annoyance for an 11th level party. Now there are core rules for scaling damage severity by level. Here's the chart they give you, but I don't think this chart is very useful. Looking at the dangerous column and the level 1 to 4 row, a level 1 character may be instantly killed by 2d10 damage, although I think a DC 12 is pretty reasonable. I will be sure to include the 5e SRD on traps in the description below if you want more information, but just be aware that, like most stuff from the Dungeon Master's Guide, I think most of the information there is of varying utility. And I think that when you actually play the game that you come to your own conclusions. Instead, I look at two variables whenever I'm trying to determine how much damage a trap ought to do. Any given trap shouldn't do more than half of the maximum HP of the highest hit point character. This means that a fragile or uncautious character already damaged may suffer an unfortunate fate, but you won't accidentally kill a PC without good cause. It's alright to knock them out, however. The second thing that I'll do is I'll look at level appropriate monsters and see how much damage they can do in one round, and I'll use that as a starting point. Here are some specifics. Say you have a 4th level party. The barbarian with the most HP has 45 hit points, meaning I don't want to exceed 22 damage with a trap, which also just happens to be the HP of the wizard, who has the lowest in the party. I think that this party can reasonably deal with a CR4 Etten, which with its 2 attacks does an average damage of 28 per round. So for a 4th level party, I would say that a dangerous but not deadly trap should do about 14 to 24 points of damage. 4d6 has an average of 14 and a maximum of 24. And so if I'm trying to make a dangerous trap for a level 4 party, it's going to do 46 damage. The second major factor when designing a trap is what the party composition looks like. Is there a rogue in the party? If not, I would advise against making extensive use of traps. Rogues are specialized at dealing with traps because of their multiple expertise. Bards can also cover this niche, but realistically any character is capable of dealing with traps if they can roll well enough. If there isn't a wizard in the party, and nobody else has the Arcana skill, then requiring it to disarm a magical trap may be a severe difficulty, so you may want to pause before you do that. Keep in mind the party and their specializations when you're designing your traps. The third major point is the style of game. Are traps a mere hindrance or deadly all on their own? I think that truly deadly traps should be used sparingly. We don't want to kill a character without meaning to. Here's what I mean. A party is traveling down a corridor and they inadvertently hit a tripwire. They feel as the ground beneath them begins to shake and the tunnel behind them begins to collapse. They all know that if they cannot act quickly, they may all die. This kind of trap is more akin to a skill challenge. There are multiple fail states. Even if all of them are failed, there is still a decent chance, usually a dexterity saving throw, that a character may manage to escape certain death. But here's the thing, even traps that are merely a hindrance can also up the tension and the drama. Say the party's trying to sneak up on some gnolls in a dungeon. The rogue notices a pressure plate and a swinging pendulum nestled in the ceiling. The rogue is an expert at dealing with traps. He's confident he can do it. But can he do it without avoiding triggering the trap and alerting the gnolls? Failure in this case doesn't just mean some damage. It still does, but mostly it means losing the element of surprise in the upcoming battle with the gnolls. Now, of course, you have to decide how the players are going to actually deal with those traps. So what I'll first do before there's any traps is I will ask the players how they proceed. If it's cautiously, with a scout ahead of the party, defensively, in a tight group with drawn swords and raised lanterns, or brazenly, charging headlong into danger. Whichever way they go, I usually offer the first 2 player characters to make perception checks. This is to see any ambushing creatures and to detect the presence of any traps ahead of them. It is then an investigation check to determine the nature of any given trap and to determine how to disarm it. If it is a magical trap, an Arcana check or a successful dispel magic is usually going to foil that trap, while a mundane trap is usually solved with a dexterity thieves tools check. You can also decide that if there isn't a rogue in the party, or if a different player has a good idea about how a different skill might apply, say athletics to wedge something beneath a pressure plate and prevent it from activating, other skills can work instead. Spells and abilities used creatively can also be a good foil if used properly. Overall, if the players have a creative idea and roll reasonably, I will usually allow their idea to work and for the trap to be foiled. Now, one major piece of advice with traps is that I would recommend that you try to foreshadow them. If you haven't seen my video on dungeons and low-level play, I would recommend it because I go into more detail about why I like to do this. In brief, we want to hint that a trap is going to occur without the players necessarily catching on, so that when the trap finally springs, it feels very narratively satisfying. Now here's how I do it. In an area description, include an innocuous detail that the players are likely to miss or forget. You see a large stone room, 20 feet wide and 60 feet long. There are several vacant hide tents along the western wall. There's a small pile of wooden stakes near the tents. There are a handful of picks leading up near an excavated hole in the eastern wall. There are several large ornate arches that have runic carvings throughout the length. There are a pair of enormous doors at the back of the chamber, one of which is ajar, with small footprints leading up to it. What is the setup in that scenario? What are the player characters most likely to interact with? I would expect most players to check out either the hole in the wall, or maybe the door, or maybe the tents. My favorite kind of player might ask about those carvings, but I think virtually no players are going to ask about those stakes, except maybe to pick them up. They're just wooden after all. But in this description, I have set up two things. One, the goblins have pickaxes and are capable of excavation. Two, the goblins have spikes. So later, in the midst of a pitched battle, when one goblin turns and flees and a PC chases after, it's still a surprise when the PC falls down into a spike pit trap. Now, some of my players have gotten used to my usual tricks. Shout out to my friend Zach. But if you're just starting out, or haven't done this before, you should be able to set up a trap without the players realizing that anything has been set up at all. Now, if you have any favorite traps that you have used or seen used, feel free to include them in the comments below. I hope you guys have all found something that you can put in your game. All of that said, thank you guys for watching. Peace out.